Welcome to the Gray Range Podcast. My name is David Rousseau. We're going to explore the poetry of how we live, how we learn, and how we find our way along this strange path we call life. If you are curious about people, their stories, and all things savage and wonderful, join me on the Gray Range. All right.
Signs on, mic check.
And we're back with another episode of the Gray Range Podcast. Myself, David Rousseau, and my co-host, Lucas Orich. And today we have Jeremy, and how do I pronounce your last name, Jeremy? Durand. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Jeremy.
Thank you for inviting me.
I really appreciate it. It was I located your business through the Hey Ho Dojo website. So I was kind of looking at their training schedule, and I've kind of been, playing around with ideas for my own website and stuff like that. And I liked their website. So I was like, well, who made this website? So went down to the bottom, clicked on the link, and then I'd seen you somewhere else, somewhere with a local through social media.
Yep, probably.
So I was like, oh, okay. Obviously you've done some work in the community.
Absolutely.
And part of what we're trying to do is to bring in people from the community who are of a creative mind or who are contributing to kind of that organic growth, and kind of get that conversation. Normally we'll start with a piece of poetry that I write just to kind of get things going. And I noticed that I've actually written a lot about social media, the influence of the internet on our culture. I mean, it's kind of hard to not be influenced by that as an artist or a creative person in any way, shape, or form. So the piece that I selected to read is called Solitary Disconnect. Plugged in, engaged, the sound of the system's whine as it powers up. Disconnect, power down. The high-pitched, almost imperceptible sound of the powered device gives way to true silence, and I can hear the rain falling, wind blowing, solitary sounds on a solitary night. The storm becomes a veil between the individual and the rest of society, as much as that point-and-click interface that now sits unplugged. No one really appreciates a summer storm like the blissfully alone. A warm cup of tea, a book, a blanket, and all distractions cease. The world is every raindrop. Thunder becomes the dialect of the solitary. The moment will be maddeningly brief, an afternoon or an evening at best, so each droplet, each flash of lightning must be savored. Then the rain ceases, and the sun begins to break up the clouds, birds sing in the trees again, and we know that it is time to rejoin the world. The veil lifts, we plug back in, and the individual rejoins society, and that high-pitched whine of systems drawing power becomes lost in the sounds of an awakening world. So I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years is there's always the sound of electricity. There's always the sound of something being plugged in. So you'll notice when you're out in the wilderness that there's this total silence. But you can notice in your house if it's quiet and then your fridge turns on or your computer boots up, you'll hear these electrical noises, and they're with us all the time. I think we ignore them.
Yeah, if you pay attention to it a lot, I think a lot of the time, it's just background noise. It's white noise.
Yeah,
it's just some other thing kicking in, and your brain just tunes it out.
Sure. Yeah,
I think, like you said, you probably just pay attention to it when you're in nature.
Yeah,
and you actually have that silence, and that's when you really notice the difference.
Sure. I think in our society now, I just think that silence is such a much rarer thing for a lot of people than it used to be. We're used to just that background noise of human life, of civilization. So when you take somebody out of that and put them into that, secluded, solitary thing, and I think it's another thing too that we notice it more when we're alone. If we're with other people, we're engaged with, what we're doing. But once we're alone and we kind of start to notice, it's kind of like that sounds are louder, dark. When you're alone in the dark, sounds seem to amplify. You tend to pick things up a little bit more.
I think people they get used to always having something, begging for their attention or that demands their attention, whether it's their phone and they're always scrolling. But a lot of people don't like to be alone because then you're stuck with this crazy person inside here without a bunch of other stuff going on. That's frightening for people.
Yeah, or in my case, just horrible tinnitus.
Yeah, ring.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's constant. If I'm in dead quiet, it's so loud in my head, like it's just this constant ringing. But years of playing in garage bands with concrete floors and
doesn't help.
No ear protection and drummers who just love to be loud. And because when you're playing live, like live rehearsal, the drums are the sound of the drums. Everything else needs to be louder than that. So you can hear it. So all your guitar amplifiers and everything like that has to get louder than the drums. And the more, because when I was young, we played like kind of punk rock, heavy metal. The drummer gets louder. The faster, the more into it he gets, he's playing louder and louder. So the amplifiers get louder and louder. And then after about 2 hours of that, you walk outside and you can't hear anything. But I pass all the hearing tests. So Jeremy, what does your perfect day look like? It's a question I like to ask people. Like if you had a day that you had to live over and over again.
I'd say a perfect day, it's not going to be very professional because it's not going to have anything to do with work, but I'd say the perfect day is probably in nature, middle of nowhere with my 2 dogs and my wife, just preferably close to water and just close to a river, having the dogs swimming, just chilling with the wife.
Awesome.
What kind of dogs do you have?
2 German Shepherd Cross, two big boys.
Yeah. I got a Malinois, so I'm all about I like the Shepherds.
Yeah, they're great dogs, man. Great dogs. How long have you been married for?
For about 6 years now.
Okay. Right on.
It took me too long to figure that out. If the wife is watching, she's not going to be happy.
No, that's okay. That's okay. At least you remembered to mention his wife this time. We're not going to get him in trouble.
Right. Man, we're what? This would be the 13th or 14th episode total?
This will be the 16th episode.
16th episode. My wife hasn't watched a single one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we've watched a handful of them.
Yeah,
like together. I watch them over and over in editing.
Of course.
So each episode I watch at least 3 times. So I don't go back too often to watch them. My wife does ask occasionally. She'll be like, "Oh, I want to watch one of these." So I will play it when we're kind of in the kitchen or whatever. I'll put it on the background. She can watch it. There's a few that are really good that I think she would enjoy. So
I'll watch them and then I'll be like, man, I swear too much. I'm a de-esser's worst nightmare because I say S a lot.
Everybody does, yeah. Awesome. So I can't help but detect an accent. So
of course, first thing that everybody notices.
Yeah, of course, of course. So and I saw on your bio that you came to Canada?
Yeah, so I came to Canada
in 2020,
7 years ago now.
Oh, 7 years ago, okay.
In 2017, so about 7 years ago. And I come from France.
Okay.
Very small town in France. And, I just knew that I wanted to see something a little bit more than just that small town that I was from. So went to Vancouver to see a little bit of the world. And I was planning to stay there for about a year or two. And I met my wife at work there.
As it happens.
So not living in Canada anymore, of course. And I came here not speaking any English whatsoever. So that was the tough part.
Okay.
And just took a job in a warehouse and just listened to people talking and tried to pick up a few words here and there. And after about 6 months, I started to be able to have a conversation.
Okay. Was it helpful that half of everything's in French in Canada?
It's not at all. Not in Vancouver.
Yeah?
No.
I guess half of everything's in like Mandarin in Vancouver.
And I'm not sure that... I don't think our French here holds up. I think it's
similar.
It's similar.
It helps when you're grocery shopping. Let's say you can read the stuff in French.
Yeah,
that helps. But nobody in Vancouver speaks French. So
no, that's kind of what I meant because a lot of our signage and all of our commercial text all has to be bilingual. So I know when I was in the 90s when I was in Paris, my French was not well received. It wasn't good to be honest, but a lot of the time I got less dirty looks in Paris speaking English than trying to speak French.
You would,
and that was the only country that's like that. Like in Germany and Spain, and I'm trying to speak the language. They're like, hey, you could say good morning, and they're kind of happy about it.
Same thing when I was in France, man. people were disgusted by my limited French, and I call it cereal box French. Like as a kid growing up, you're eating your cereal in the morning, and you're looking at the back of the box, and you're reading it in French because you're tired of reading the English. You're just looking at the words. You're just kind of trying to figure it out and puzzle it out. And that's about the extent of my knowledge. But what is the little town you grew up in?
So it's called Sens.
Okay.
Sens, and it's so if you know anything about wine, that's going to speak to you. It's in Burgundy.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard of it. Okay. And what brought you to Canada? Was it work or just adventure or just a change?
Adventure. I had a really good situation back in France. I was a realtor. So I was making really good money, had a good situation. But like I said, I knew that for the next 30 years of my life, I was going to be a realtor, selling the same kind of houses, seeing the same people and doing the same thing. And when I was around 20 when I moved. So when you're that young, you want to, see the world, learn different skills. So learning English was one of the challenge that I gave myself. And that was the kind of the reason.
It's that kind of call to adventure.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's I grew up in a kind of a tourist town in Alberta, in Jasper in the mountains, and we would meet people in the summertime from all over the world. And it was always the same story. People would come there because they could come there and work for just the summer, and they would have accommodation. The hotel or the restaurant they would work at would have an apartment that they could stay in, and people would come from all over the world. And we'd meet all these people that came to Canada, and then I kind of understood because after I traveled, throughout a little bit throughout the world, you kind of see you kind of get to see how the world is, and then you come to Canada and you're like, oh, I get it. I see why people like it here.
It's a beautiful country.
Yeah, and it's beautiful and it's quiet.
Exactly.
There's not as many people. And if you like that sort of thing, I get that some people like cities. Some people like that have everything 15 minutes from them. Everything's accessible. You kind of blend into the crowd. You're kind of anonymous. Some people like the quiet. And when did you start doing web design then?
So I first started with graphic design when I was like 12 years old or something like that. I got Photoshop on my laptop, and I started just learning and doing a few logos, doing a few flyers for local companies, mostly just by word of mouth and people knowing that I was a kid trying to learn something. So they were trying to help out.
Right.
And then I moved to Canada, worked in a warehouse, and then I stopped the warehouse because I wanted to grow and not just be a warehouse worker. That was not the plan. And then I took a lot of different jobs. I did containers, so worked in containers, just unloading the containers on pallets, that kind of job.
Yep, a lot of that in Vancouver.
Yeah, lots of that.
Yep.
And then I knew that I wanted to do more, but for myself, not just working for people. So there was that company where my wife worked at. That was a kitchen supplies wholesaler.
Okay.
And COVID happened. He was not doing so good. And so I offered him that I could make a website for him. I had already made a few websites, but just playing around. So it was not really great. But I made a online store for him selling his products.
Right.
And that's how it started. That company still exists right now. It's my biggest business.
Oh, I see.
And so I ship online kitchen products online to all over Canada.
Okay.
And so that's where it started. I created that one store that became very successful and had to redo the website again and again, learning more skills.
Yeah.
And then I started doing another 4 websites for online stores.
Okay.
I've seen that one was successful, so I wanted to build up on that. And then I moved here in Grande Prairie, and I started having a few people inquire about web design on Facebook groups, things like that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what drew you to Grande Prairie then? Like, why? How did you go from Vancouver to here? Like, what?
So I'm gonna say that might be a little rude to the Vancouver people. So I'm not here to offend anybody, but I'm just gonna say my piece.
Yeah.
Vancouver can get a little rude and a little stressful. So, people don't get paid enough.
I'm just going to get you to just take that mic with you when you turn your head.
Okay.
So you can move it right over. And I'm just going to do one thing. I'm going to move this mic over a little bit because the boom of that mic and that camera is right in his face.
Okay, pause.
Pause.
I don't see that well. I'm looking up at that camera. I'm like, I'm fucking in there somewhere.
There we go.
All right. So people in Vancouver
just... first of all, they don't make enough money. They can't buy real estate. Everything is expensive. Lots of immigration. Nothing against immigration. Obviously, I'm an immigrant, but I have something against immigration when immigrants don't respect the country and don't try to become part of the country. And there's a lot of that in Vancouver, which can be frustrating even as an immigrant, even more for Canadian, like real Canadian people. But as an immigrant, when you really try to respect the people and the country.
Yeah.
Yes, and Vancouver has been that way for a long, long time. So there's always been a really large Japanese, Chinese community since the 40s in Vancouver. And then I think it was the 80s. They had a lot of immigration from India, and all those places. Once you get to, I think it's when you get to a certain density of people, they have their own community.
Exactly,
they build their own community, and essentially they start to have their own economy, and it works separately from the rest of society.
Yep.
So it's a little bit different than what we would say like a homogenous. So I think when we think about immigration, we think about like New York in the 30s, where people came and they assimilated into this new Western world, and now it's like
it's not really like that because I was in Toronto a few years back. My brother was living there, and he was training Wing Chun, like doing kung fu and stuff, and so I flew out there to visit him, did some classes, and we're hanging out. He's like, "Hey, you want to go to Chinatown?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I know this great place to go and get a bite to eat." So then we walked across the street. So we're like downtown Toronto. You walk into Chinatown, and it's like going to a different country. All the signs are in Chinese. We're like the only two guys like us. It's like, I felt tall for a minute.
Yeah.
Nothing against Chinese people. They're great people. But it was like, to your point is that it was you were very distinctly, you were now in Chinatown, and it was culturally, it was completely Chinese.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got treated well, like there was no issues, but it was just it wasn't, it didn't feel like I don't know. That's the problem with being Canadian is we don't really have an idea of what Canadian is anymore. It kind of gets very diluted.
I argue that there is no such thing as Canadian culture. I think that we have icons where we have like it's a beaver and a moose and a maple leaf and hockey.
Yeah, we kind of
Bryan Adams.
We worship these false idols.
But
it's a dangerous.
But they're things that have been selected by the government, right? There's a reason why they have Canadian content laws and Canadian media.
Yep.
Is because otherwise it would be wiped out by something much more powerful. Like we're close to the one of the cultural epicenters of the world in the U.S., and a lot of our culture is Americanized culture. It's American culture, and there's nothing wrong with that. Although in Canada there is, because we're told from a very young age in Canada, we're raised saying, "At least I'm not American."
Yeah.
So your identity is not that you are something; it's that you are not something else.
Yep.
And a lot of Canadians take a lot of pride in that, and it's this backwards way of thinking because that's not an identity. You can't have it's the opposite of an identity. It's like saying, you know, I'm not my own race, but at least I'm not that race. Like, and
it's a country with no true sense of patriotism. Like nationalism
not
isn't really a thing here. It's kind of which is unfortunate. So we don't really. I think. I mean, I have my idea about what Canada is, but to other people, that might be completely, you know, a very extreme opinion of what my Canada is to me. Like, it's interesting.
I guess I wouldn't know. Like I've traveled a good bit around the world, but I know there's different regions in France. How culturally different is it, like from the north to the south?
So it's exactly like that. It's not so much there's kind of like provinces in France, which are way smaller than Canada, obviously, but it's kind of like provinces, and it's not really different from one province to another. It's more from north to south.
Yeah,
and North French people are going to be the complete opposite accent. Culture, everything complete opposite of South people. So you have kind of that Canada and Quebec.
Sure.
Well, you got this weird thing going on, like, you know, in the northern part of France. I mean, you got England right across the English Channel. You got all these, you know, little French towns where everyone mostly speaks English, and then you get to the Mediterranean side, and you're like, man,
right along the Spanish border, it's like
different country.
Yeah, like absolutely.
Totally different.
That's you figure that out. That's exactly that. You have the England kind of like influence on the north side, and then you have the Spanish, Portuguese, Italian influence on the south side. So it's like very different cultures.
I enjoyed traveling in France. So like when we were there, we were there for maybe were in Europe for a month, and we spent maybe a week and a half in France, which is never enough to go see a country. But we stayed in a bunch of little bed and breakfast places and just kind of like well off the beaten track. We had a rail pass, and we were treated fantastic. And not just because we were Canadian and didn't speak the language. I mean, it was just the people there were very friendly. Like Paris, I was there for 2 hours, man, just to switch trains to get up to, some of the classic places that Canadians go to visit. We want to go to Dieppe, we want to go to Juno Beach, Courcey-sur-Mer. I think that's how you say it. I don't remember, but so we're literally switching train stations, and the time that I was in Paris, I was like, fuck, I don't care if they nuke this place. Like that was an ignorant, unfriendly, tourist death trap. And I was like, I'm not here to be a tourist. I just trying to fucking get to the next train station.
When I was in Paris, we arrived at night, and where we were staying was right along the river, and you could see the city lit up, and the Eiffel Tower was like up the long boulevard with the river. You could see it. It was beautiful. Walked around that night. I was like, wow, the city's like enchanting. Took a little boat ride. Woke up the next morning, but in the daylight, I was like, oh my goodness. Like it took a totally different place. And there was
some dude shit in the street.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there was.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a lot of my like traveling in Europe, that trip was like that though. Like we arrived in Berlin and we got to the hostel and they wouldn't let us in. And we're like, why can't we go in the hostel? And then like all these little green police vans showed up and raided the hostel and arrested a whole bunch of people. And then we were able to go in. And I was like, where are we? Like how rough is this neighborhood? And it was pretty bad. And then the same thing when we were at these large cultural centers in Paris. There's all these African immigrants, and they all have blankets laid out trying to sell trinkets to tourists.
Yeah.
And you'd kind of be walking, and there's probably hundreds of them in front of these major monuments or museums and stuff like that. And then these police vans would like pull up from every direction, and these guys would grab all four corners of their blanket, throw it over their shoulders, and it was just like this mass chaos. There's cops chasing people down, like tackling people, and like standing there like, this is entertaining but dangerous. Like, I don't want to be hanging out here, but it was definitely a side of that romantic idea of Paris. And the Eiffel Tower was kind of scary. Like it's very rusty. The elevator was kind of shaky, and then you get up to the other level where they have it all like blocked off with like steel grating because so many people have committed suicide. And you're like, this is not romantic anymore. This is a sad story.
It looks good in a heavily photoshopped postcard.
Exactly. Yeah. I would not advise anybody that wants to see friends to go to Paris. You can pass through Paris because you have to, but if you want to see the authentic part of France, stay in Paris for one day, do the basic tourist thing, and then just drive off.
Yeah, I can see that.
Get into the small towns. So when you moved to Grande Prairie, so you were kind of sick of the
Vancouver people, you can say it.
Yeah, the culture in Vancouver. Why'd you pick Grande Prairie? Was there something about it that kind of flagged up for you? Did you know people that were from here? Or?
Not whatsoever. So the idea first was Alberta. Yep. We both, my wife and I, knew that we wanted to go to Alberta just for values.
Right.
So we have those values of respect and old school values, and we wanted to be in a place that had those same values. And so we knew we wanted to go in Alberta. We checked the rent in, Calgary, around Calgary, not the town. Yeah. And we checked a little bit everywhere. And Grande Prairie just happened. Somebody answered my email on the rent, and it just happened. And we said, fuck it, let's go.
Nice.
Okay. Interesting.
And we love it.
Yeah, no, that's great.
What does your wife do, if you don't mind me asking?
She doesn't work.
Okay.
She has some health issues, so she's a stay-at-home mom for the dogs.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering if there was something career-related that kind of drew her in that direction
whatsoever.
too, that helped you guys form your decision for here. So has Grande Prairie lived up to your expectations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, the first thing we noticed moving here was the people and friendliness and just normal, real people, So you go somewhere, they are not fake, but they are nice. Yep. And they hold the door for you, which might sound like a stupid thing, but just somebody holding the door for you and saying thank you or you're welcome.
Well, I think a lot of people that grew up in this, I can only kind of speak for Northern Alberta because that's kind of my stomping grounds. But man, if I didn't hold the door for somebody when I was a kid, I would have got an ass whooping. So It's just, you learn that when you're a kid, you hold the door for the person behind you, like or or go and open it for somebody.
Yep.
Just
that's the whole old school values that I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's simple stuff, but
very cool.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast was had a lot to do with values, a lot to do with talking to people about their story, about their life. I find when we get to know each other as human beings, we're a little bit more likely to listen to each other, to give each other some slack on maybe viewpoints that might not be the same, or allow each other just to kind of have respect for each other so we can live our lives. There's a lot less pretentiousness in a place like Grande Prairie, where it's a smaller city, where there's not a lot of expectation culturally to stay with one particular viewpoint, because we're all, maybe say in Canada, we're all more or less recent immigrants. Canada's a very young country. We have the First Nations people that are here, but the overwhelming majority of the population came from somewhere else. Grande Prairie being with like an older settlement in Alberta, so the county of Grande Prairie is county number 1, so the first incorporated county in the province. But the province is 100 years old, maybe. Like in cities like Grande Prairie are very young. So you've got a large community of people whose ancestors settled here, who are rural and they're farming, living in small communities, and then you have everyone else that came from somewhere else, and all for the same reason.
Yep.
Everybody came here to make a good on their life. There was a time when people were coming here to cause trouble, because we had a lot of work in the oil and gas industry, where people would come here to make a lot of money very quickly. And people generally don't leave places where they have like structure. So you're not attracting the best people.
Yep.
You're attracting people who have no support systems, who are people who want to make money quickly. Young people who are just out to, hey, look, I can come to this place and I can make a good wage, right, without any education. And then that brought in a lot of negative things into Grande Prairie, but I think that's starting to change.
The amount of work available in the area, like you're always going to have growing pains when people come somewhere for work, and you'll always have some bullshit that goes with it. But I think by and large, people come here to work, so it's a very working class city, and people that are here to work and get ahead in life, they're probably more grounded in those traditional values, sort of what you were looking for, and it seems to be pretty common in this area for sure.
Well, that's the thing as well. That's the other value that we really appreciate here is, like you said, it's a working class. Yeah. And my wife doesn't work anymore, but she stopped working 2 years ago. But before that, she was a really hard worker. She was working warehouses. Yeah. Very strong woman, lifting thousands of pounds a day. Yep. And I've been working my ass off since I came to Canada. Did tons of jobs and never stopped. Just to make it. And we wanted that value as well, that working class value, people who know what work is worth.
Well, and sure. I think that's why people who are working class are generally polite. They're not they don't have that asshole syndrome they don't grow up entitled.
Yeah. Sure.
Generally
for the most
speaking,
part.
They don't grow up already having everything. They had to work for it. And in order to succeed, you generally have to be polite. Because if you're an asshole, a lot of doors get closed in your face.
Sure. And one thing I've noticed just in life in general, there's assholes everywhere, right? Like it doesn't matter where you go. Yeah. And generally the problems I've noticed, like the problems of life, they're human problems and they're the same everywhere. So if you're living in one city or living in one group or culture, the people that you'll have interpersonal problems. And those interpersonal problems are the same everywhere. Everybody has problems, and people have the same inability to deal with them no matter where you go. So it's just a matter of, okay, well, what do I want? I guess one of my questions would be like, did the COVID pandemic have anything kind of bearing on your choice to move to Alberta?
Not at all, no, because so we moved to Alberta October of 2022. So COVID was way past.
Yeah, I know a lot of people kind of at that time that was a factor, just based on how local or provincial governments had handled the pandemic.
Yep.
They had decided that Alberta might be a better place because of just how it was handled here was a little bit differently than British Columbia or I think Ontario or Quebec. Yep. What was one of the biggest things that you found that was different about Alberta right away? Like, what did you notice right away that was kind of stood out to you?
I'm gonna say the calmness. So just being able to go places, being able to do things, and not be just stressed right away because you have all of those people that are running and that are stressed around you.
Right.
And what surrounds you makes you.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
just having calm people and just less noise, less craziness, nature, just 10 minutes drive and you're in the middle of nowhere and you can chill.
I was just having a quick look there via the Google. It took a minute because my phone's in Poland, but in 2001 the population here was 36,000 and now I think it's officially 70 something. So the city's pretty well doubled in size in the last 20 years. So part of those just kind of,
and expected to grow a lot more. I think I just saw some statistics about a week ago saying Grande Prairie is the second cheapest Western city to live in. There's I think it's like Estevan, Saskatchewan or something like that is the cheapest as far as real estate. And Grande Prairie would be second cheapest. And obviously Grande Prairie is a little bit more developed. I know with a lot of our economy based in oil and gas, which is still quite strong, agriculture, forestry, these things are kind of as a Canada, those are our heartland industries, our bedrock industries, and Grande Prairie has those as a basis. So there'll always be work, and I think of Grande Prairie a lot of as I think of like the Old West. Like people come out here because there's very few places in the world that you can change your own life. I'm kind of a case in point to that. Like my family wasn't well off when I was young, and then when my dad left, my mom raised us in government housing. She worked 3 jobs to keep my sister and myself, fed, and in my life, I made some bad choices. At one point had nothing, and now I've built myself back up. I worked hard. I learned a lot, made sacrifices, but there's few places in the world that you can do that, where you could actually take yourself from one social class to another in one lifetime. And Alberta has that ability. If someone wants to come and they want to work, if they want to start a business, if they want to take a job and work hard, heck, if you want 3 jobs, we will give you 3 jobs.
You know what? And I've said it since I moved here. The only people not working in this city don't want to, or can't, right? But but there is no lack of opportunity.
Absolutely,
it's not like other places in Canada. Like remember when Mike was on, and he. The only job he could apply for in his hometown was to go and be a gas jockey and pump gas. You're just one resume in a stack of 100. There's 100 people waiting for that one job to pump gas. That doesn't happen in this city, man. There's so many jobs, it's ridiculous.
Yep.
Just to go back to your point about kind of you become what you're surrounded by. That's true, man. Like that's why they call it the rat race. Like in those big cities, it's like everyone gets in their car in the morning. They're fucking angry because they know they got to go drive on the freeway for an hour. They're already toxic by the time they get to the job that they hate.
Absolutely.
That they have to do just to make that payment on that $800,000 home that's got 2 bedrooms in it.
Yeah.
And then they drive home angry after, and it's not good, man. It's a shitty way to live.
It is. That was exactly what you described. That was that for me. I had a job that was, so I was living in Richmond, if you know a little bit about Vancouver.
A little bit, yeah.
And I was working in Surrey.
Yep.
And it was an hour morning and night.
Yep.
And just like you said, you get to work already you're angry because somebody pissed you off on the road. Yep. And it took you 1 hour and a half instead of 1 hour. And you get back home, you're pissed off, and it's the same every single day.
And you're literally burning 2 or 3 hours of your life every day just to commute to somewhere you don't want to be. Yeah, it's miserable.
So with graphic design, were you interested in like art as a child? Was that something you did? Did you draw? Did you?
Not whatsoever. That's the funny part on that is that I'm not an artistic person.
Okay.
You give me a pen and a paper, I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to do a kid house with a sun on the
Sure.
corner, and that's what I'm going to be able to do.
Yeah.
I can't draw for shit, but I can take inspiration from pieces, from whatever, and make you a design on Photoshop from scratch.
I see.
So that was really more the tech part. I've always been tech savvy. And so learning all of those skills on Photoshop and being able to create things from scratch, that was more that part.
And that design end of it, that was something you picked up on your own? That wasn't part of formal education?
Not at all, no.
Okay, so it was just a passion where you picked it up, had an interest in it, and like, hey, I can do this. This is awesome.
Exactly. I was the type of kid that instead of going outside and having a lot of friends and stuff like that, I was the type of kid that was having that. I remember I had that little game. It was an architecture game on a PC, and I was like building houses and making plans, 2D plans that were then making a 3D house. I've always been, in techie stuff. Like
sure. That. Yeah, and people get. I think everybody's different, but having that ability to see patterns and put things together is generally something that becomes constructive, because it always leads to building stuff.
When I was welding, like I can sketch something and then build it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't I can't draw.
Yeah, but before you were trained, you couldn't, right? So
I had to.
Once you learned the process of how to build it, then you could go, oh, okay, I can picture this. And
I struggled with everything, man. It wasn't something that I'm not gifted in that department. Yeah. I could draw a pretty sick dinosaur, but
about the same.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So at what point did you look at that and say, hey, this is something I would like to do, or I could do for a living?
So actually, it came from the people. It didn't come from me, because the thing is that I like helping people. I've been in that situation, where you have the skills, but you don't know what to do with them, and people ask you for help. So like I said, when I was a kid, with the logos and the flyers and all of that,
right? And
I knew that people and businesses needed help on that side. So that's when I started to see, like I was saying, Facebook post. I need help with building a design. That was Lane at Heiho Dojo.
Okay.
I need help building a website.
I didn't know he just kind of put it out there.
I'm pretty sure it was the case.
Threw up the bat signal and you showed up.
I'm pretty sure that was that. Or it might have been somebody else, but that was that kind of post. And and just first wanting to help people. And I didn't even redo it for the money at first. I was thinking I'm just going to give advice. And then it became that, can you make a website for me then, since you know how to do all of that?
Right.
And then after doing a few of them, I started to realize, hey, there is a need here, and there is something I can make money. So let's combine those two, and let's create Creativibe and help people make money.
Sure. So how much do you think that web presence helps a business now? Like, it seems like you can't really have a business without having, like, even if you have a solid brick and mortar location, like a restaurant, like it doesn't seem like you can really exist outside of the internet now.
Well, the thing is that I think I can answer that with one question to you. Anything you're looking for, what do you do?
Yeah, you look it up online.
And if they don't have a website, they don't have a presence, even at least a social media, you're not going to find them.
Yeah.
And it's not that time anymore that you go downtown and you walk around and you're like, I'm looking for a dojo for my kids' jiu-jitsu classes. And you're going to walk around downtown and you're going to see and you're going to go in the business. It's not that time anymore. People just look for reviews online, look for website, how well made the website is, what kind of social media they have. And that's how you get your clients nowadays.
Yeah, 100%. Like that really nice website with a kind of an intuitive interface becomes the slick storefront. It's like the storefront window with the mannequins and all that on it.
Without getting too specific, I can say that online sales are a significant part of our business, and having that online presence. Now, a lot of people, they might not choose to use all the features of your website. We get a lot of customers like, I don't trust the internet. Like, they want to call the store and process this transaction over the phone because they saw, they found it online.
Yep.
And even from a social media perspective, when we put up clips for the range, which are made by me, and they're horrible because I'm not that great at that stuff. I'm like, okay, we do everything.
I think they're pretty fantastic. I like them.
But it does generate a lot of reviews.
Yeah.
It gets people talking like, oh, yeah, I saw it. And they'll come in and they'll chat at the counter with us. And then they might even sign up for a class. Very often that's that little thing they needed to see, that visual representation of what we do gets them to sign up.
Exactly.
And so it's a significant, has a significant impact on the business.
It doesn't have to be the way that the transaction is going to be made, but it's the way it's going to start.
For sure.
90% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what we're not going to do is we're not going to look in the yellow pages under whatever category. Those days are dead.
Yeah, well, that's just it. And I was somebody like who traveled for work a good bit.
Yeah.
And I would use the phone book in the hotel room a lot because I'd get somewhere and I'd be like, oh, I heard this city has a really good bookstore or a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would pull out the
yellow
pages.
Look under books.
Yeah. And I remember there was a time I was traveling with somebody who was younger than me, and they were like, this was like early cell phone days when we had like the original flip phones and stuff like that. And we got to a hotel traveling for work, and they were kind of like, well, how do we find this whatever? I'm like, well, you use the phone book. And they kind of looked at me funny. And I pulled the phone book out of the drawer in the hotel.
Look, bro, it's got an address in it.
Yeah. And it was like that. Like in the old days, your name, phone number, and address was public.
Yep.
Like you had to actually tell the phone book people, don't put my address in there. Yep. But it was all there. And he looked at me like I was like a wizard, right? Just found this thing. I'm like, you have these things called phone books. Now, there's no phone books in the room, man.
I can see that because I am 30-year-old.
Yeah.
And I think I was born just on time to know that part of it.
Yeah.
Because, I used the phone book, like, just played around with the phone book.
Sure.
In my parents' house when I was probably like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And that was probably the last time I've seen a phone book. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's not a thing anymore.
No.
Yeah, it was how we knew, like, who's who. I grew up in a small town, and that's like it was like the compendium of information of who lived in the town. Yeah. I spent like I said, spent a lot of time traveling when I was younger for work, and one of the things I would do in every city that I was in or every town that I was in, I would open up the phone book, and I'd always get the people I was traveling with ask me, "What are you looking for?" I'm like, "I'm looking for Hitler. He might be here." I never found anyone named Hitler in any town that I was ever in. I was just waiting, like, someday I'm going to stumble upon somebody and I'm going to phone them and be like, what the heck?
That's probably why you couldn't find them. They already got too many phone calls.
No, like, it's just one of those things. I don't think anybody kept the name. Like, one of those, yeah.
I would say, though, the phone book, despite the fact that it had your phone number and address in it, we had arguably more privacy than we do today.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And, like, so I guess moving on from the whole idea of like business web presence, like because we have social media now, how much does that drive? Like, how much do you see that driving like both business and personal? Because I think we're at a point right now where social media is kind of viewed as like almost 50-50 as a blessing and a curse, right? Like I see tons of benefit in it, and especially for people trying to build brands. But at the same time, like it's become this thing that a lot of people disparage a lot. They talk like they look at social media as like, I don't want to be on social media because of all the negativity.
Yep. Well, you have a good algorithm with social media nowadays that shows you really what you want to see. So I'd say for a business, social media is very important because you can target people with specific interests. So
right.
Because of that algorithm, you can post about a topic and somebody that's interested and might be a buyer or a client is going to find your business on there. But in the same time, to me, it's kind of 50-50 because you have browsers like Google that are going to be really important for businesses because somebody looking for something is going to find your business and they're going to have the intent to come to your business or purchase from your business. Facebook, Instagram, all of that. They might see you. You might get their attention, but they might not have the intent to do something. So I'd say it's 50-50. It's very important to have a presence, but it's not the most important on social media.
Does paying for like subscriptions or paying for advertising on those social media, does it make a huge difference for how much you see?
Absolutely.
Okay.
you're not gonna get much when you start without paying for ads. Let's just put it that way. So when I started the kitchen store online, I had to put let's say a few thousands a month towards ads to get a few thousands in sales.
I see.
And until you are known and until you have that based clientele, you're not going to get anything without the ads. It's the door to door that you had 30 years ago.
Yeah. What I've been seeing recently on social media is since Meta, so Facebook and Instagram have launched their paid usership. Since X has a paid usership now, it's become more or less a pay-to-play system. It seems like people who are using it passively, like if I'm just going to show pictures of my family and I want to stay in connection with people I want to stay connected with, that part's still free because the algorithm really isn't looking for pictures of your kid's birthday unless they're going to steal the pictures to sell something later, which they do. But at the same time, that it's kind of outside the economy now. And then there's the economic side where if I'm an influencer trying to get people to watch my streaming videos of me playing video games or whatever, that I have to pay for. I have to have the subscription service in order to get that seen. And it seems like that economy online is changing quite a bit now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But you might be surprised actually of how far it goes, because the example you just took that you're posting pictures of your kids and that's not going to be used or anything. You're going to have business like me that are going to sell something for kids. Right. And that algorithm, I'm going to target on my ad interest kids.
Sure.
And that picture that you post, you're going to be right in the algorithm and you're going to see my ads because Facebook knows you have kids and you need to buy stuff for your kids.
Right. Okay. So yeah, because you might not see benefit as extension, but you're definitely going to be marketed too.
Exactly.
Yeah, we definitely put ourselves out there. We're kind of fish in a barrel in a way. Like they're constantly baiting us with not just sales. Like it's not just economic where they're trying to get us to buy things. They're also selling us ideas. And sometimes, like one of the things I see now in my social media feeds, like I treat all the social media things a little bit differently. Like I have Facebook, but it's mostly just family, right? It's just to keep in contact with people around the world that I know. Instagram is obviously for sharing pictures, and then X or Twitter is for information, because I can tap into journalists who are freelance writers or independent journalists or amateur journalists around the world, and I can get access to on the ground information as to what's actually happening. And it's going to come with spin because that person, whoever's recording it, has an opinion. But it's better than having it filtered through, for me, the mainstream media.
For sure. Like even for the stuff that we do at work, we already know our content. Unless you're subscribed, you'll never see it because we're in the gun industry, right? So we already know it's suppressed. Doesn't matter if we're paying or not. So I should probably look at X though, as far as it's the freest of the speech platforms. So we should probably have a more active presence on there. But yeah, anything gun related in Canada, that's a tough sell.
It is.
They flat out tell you like you have to edit this post in order to whatever, and then so you edit that post. You have to edit like. Okay, so every single post we have is offensive to the algorithm, so it's kind of it is what it is. So for some types of businesses, you get what you get, but you still have to have a presence. People still want to see it, and if they're subscribed to us, they still see it. But what it means is if you're not subscribed to us, it won't make it to your account. So it's hard to grow it. You're really like you said before, we're back to door sales. We have to tell people, hey man, follow us on Instagram and you can see this stuff. They're like, oh, okay, and they'll do it. But we still have to do that old school sales to get it, to get any growth, and that's just the industry.
Absolutely, so. There's a couple of industries like that. Unfortunately, you're gonna have guns, you're gonna have news now in Canada, and I mean all of those industries, you're blocked from all of that advertising, all of that algorithm, and you have to go back to that old school advertising.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. That we don't see news on our social media in
Not
Canada
anymore.
And
And actually,
maybe
it's
that's
kind
why
of-
I've been enjoying social media so much more in the
Yeah,
past
it's
6 months.
It's a
because
lot better, isn't it?
yeah, but I follow all the mainstream media in Canada as well, right? Because I make sure that if I encounter because media is a weird word now. Media can be the CBC, which is the state. So it's the state's information, it's propaganda. It can be CNN, which is private, but it's corporate propaganda. And then you can have, like I said, you have someone with their phone on the ground in Gaza, literally recording and live streaming what's going on. And that's all media. But how it's shown to you and how it's packaged and stuff like that, it's all very different. So what I tend to do is when I see stuff that kind of runs counter to my own opinions, I tend to follow that right away. Because I'm like, well, why did that elicit a response? If I think what is it about this piece of media? And then dig into it a little bit where I'm like, is this an actual person or is this paid by somebody? Because you find a lot of these independent journalists are actually being paid by international not-for-profits or larger media groups or groups that are trying to influence the discourse because they know that the weight of somebody posting something that looks like it's independent journalism holds a lot more weight with a lot more people now than something that might come out of the mainstream media. So, as far as in artificial intelligence, like you started in graphic design, you started playing around with that. How much have you played around with some of this, like Chat GPT-4? And I've done a little bit of the image generating stuff because that's just kind of neat because you can just kind of, as a creative person, being able to just throw words
Yeah,
into
I'll show you the sick patch I made.
Yeah, into a machine and have it generate an image is almost magic.
Absolutely. I play with it every day on a daily basis because we didn't...
That's AI generated, man.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, man.
That's a good one.
There's only one way to get that, but we'll talk about that later. But that was AI. That was my first time messing around with AI. And I'm like, I need Jim Leahy with a shotgun riding a brontosaurus. And I had to like tweak it and work at it. And finally it spit that out. I was like, good enough. That'll work.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing about AI. So like I was saying, I use it every day for just text and content.
Okay.
The image to me as a professional graphic designer, it's not there yet.
Right.
Because I'm very perfectionist and I'm very particular on what I want because I know I can create it.
100%.
So I spoke with people that found that was awesome and they get an image that they love and they use it for that. Mm-hmm. And that's fine when you don't have those skills to make the image. But I find that when you have the skills to make that graphic that you want, it's never going to be good enough. So I use it once in a while to create a start of something, but I always end up on Photoshop or any other program to edit it myself.
Okay. So you kind of you're seeing the limitations of it.
For now.
Yeah. And I've heard that quite a bit recently is that, the kind of the projections of where they think AI will be and where they think it is now. In some ways, it's further along, but in some ways, I think it's adaptability. They've found it's not quite as adaptive for actual practical purposes. Like they thought it would have taken over industries and stuff like that, but it's not there yet. I think the big one right now is like law and medical, where you basically need to process a whole bunch of information. So in law, a lawyer needs to look at case law, and humanity, a human being only has so much bandwidth, can only read so many books, but something like AI can read every single legal text on that topic, every decision ever made, and spit out a pretty good synopsis on it to where somebody can take that. And then same with the medical side on diagnoses, they can take in data. That's what it does. It can take in all this data. It can interpret this data in a way that a human being won't be able to do because you won't be able to read all the studies and all the history and with some of the image stuff that's kind of image analysis stuff where it can read an X-ray differently than a human would read an X-ray because it's going to spot anomalies that a human being might miss. So cool things, I think, coming down the pike for humanity, but at the same time, it does a horrible job of making hands.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, yeah. Don't look too close at that image. If you zoom right in, the hands are all like 3-fingered. Like
it's a good tell, though.
That's the first thing.
Yeah, it's a good tell because I've seen images that I'm like, that's a real image, and it might be being used in some sort of influential way, be it advertising or media, some kind of corporate media. And then there's always the tell. There's the teeth and the hands and stuff like that.
The eyes.
Yeah, give it away. Yeah, the uncanny valley, man. Some of that is very, very eerie. But so what made you pursue like the web design thing as a passion? Like, what was it about it that really grabbed you? Was it the helping people out, or was it the actual building stuff?
I'm going to say both, because it started, like everything in my life, it started with the creation of something. That's what drives me. So creating something, starting a website from scratch and having something at the end that you created, that's what really drives me all the time. And then it became that need out there, and there's people that don't know how to build those websites.
Sure.
And that need help. And there is, not spitting on anybody out here, but there is agencies that charge a lot of money, old school agencies that are going to charge $20,000-$30,000 for a big website.
Right.
And I mean, I don't see the justification in that price. So coming into play and offering websites for a fraction of that price to people who can't at the moment afford that price point because they're trying to grow their business. They're not yet at the point that they can spend $30,000 on a website. That's what really makes me happy, you know.
Right on. And what do you think makes a successful brand online? Like, what differentiates somebody from, you know, just posting stuff onto their Instagram to somebody who's doing it effectively?
I'm gonna say it's gonna be a mix of a few things. It's gonna be the visual. Your visual always has to be on point. If you post something that's gonna look amateur, right away you're gonna lose people's interest.
Right.
It's gonna be your website. Obviously, it has to be structured. It has to look good, and it's gonna be your knowledge of marketing. So where to advertise, how much you can spend, how to set it up, because you can spend as much as you want on advertising. If you don't know how to set it up, you're not gonna reach that goal that you have. So it's a big mix, and you have to bring everything together to really have a successful brand, successful business.
Okay, yeah. I find it very interesting right now. We're at a time where people are able to generate income purely from online content. And it's not online content where it's like, I'm going to show you how to build a birdhouse. It's like the big thing for the last 2 weeks on media has been like this rap battle between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. Now, that's one thing.
Bro, where the fuck do you find time to follow all this?
I'm just a sponge.
You couldn't have missed that. You have to have seen something about that somewhere.
Yeah, but the big thing is about it is the amazing amount of reaction videos that it generated.
Yeah.
Now, to me, I find it really interesting. Like, I have a cousin who basically, for a living, he streams video games on a YouTube channel and makes a very good living doing it and has done it for years. And to me, that kind of makes sense because I think since the advent of video games, there's always been somebody's little brother or little sister who had to sit there and watch them play video games until they got their turn, which was never. Yeah. So the watching video games is as old as video games, right? I remember stand-up arcades when I was a kid in the 80s, and until that person was done with their quarter, you had to watch them play. And sometimes they'd be really good. You'd be like, wow, look how far this guy got with one quarter. That was pretty amazing. But the whole reaction thing, that it's an industry now. So what you're doing is you're taking someone else's content that somebody else made.
You're reacting to it, and there's a market for it.
And not just a market for it, but a huge amount of, and I find myself, I'm watching these things, and I'm like, I'm watching someone watch something. That's like something like, say, like I'm into bird watching, but I'm not into bird watching. I'm into bird watcher watching. Like this living vicariously through someone else. And it's this really interesting thing where we're at with virtual content, because There's no like.
It's funny how we let that shape our opinions too, though, because
Yeah.
Instead of watching someone's reaction video, you could watch the original and react to it yourself.
Sure.
Right? But people don't do that. They watch a reaction video and then maybe they go and watch it after. But it's fucked up.
But I think when it comes to
something in the human psyche that makes us do that, though.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably as well the fact that socially we're a lot less with people, around people, as it was back in the days.
Sure.
And so, that interaction that you have with that stranger that you will never meet in your life, but you're interacting with that stranger by seeing them interact with something and laughing about what they are saying or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's probably, that human interaction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because in the old days, you used to go.
Kids?
Well, when you used to buy music, and you'd buy like a physical album, a physical tape, or a physical CD, all the music came out on Tuesday in Canada. So music was released on Tuesday. And if you had an album you were waiting for, your favorite band was going to release their new record, it would come out on the Tuesday. And we used to go down to the record store and buy them before they came out. So the store would know how many to order. And, we didn't have a lot of money, so maybe one person would buy the record. And then we would go back to someone's house and listen to it. And it's, you'd watch your friends' faces as you'd show them the new whatever record. And that was reacting. And it's a human thing where you're like, this had this effect on me, this piece of music had this effect on me. I want to see if it has that same effect on someone else.
Well, I think it's contagious too. Like I remember as kids, we'd be sitting around, somebody get a new tape, you'd throw it in. And if one dude liked that song, you probably liked it too. Because he was rocking out, so you were rocking out. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good song.
Yeah, but you only had access to one album at a time.
Sure.
Right now the music is endless. Right? Like you can listen to every song ever recorded just about right now. So having that ability to almost have it, like you said, like a human touchstone with somebody over a piece of music or a piece of art, where you can say, it had this effect on me and it's having the same effect on this person. Now we're somehow linked, even though I'll never see them. But something I didn't know until recently, until this whole like Kendrick Lamar and Drake thing, is that the record labels actually pay the reactors to react to their music as advertising. So, and they pay them a lot. So these people are making a ridiculous amount of money, and it looks organic, but it's that thing that we end up in the social media world now, where everything that's presented, it may not be what it seems like. So we've got this, we're entering to that what do they call it? Like the Minority Report world, or the one where it's like a Philip K. Dick novel, where it's kind of, the technology is something separate and apart from who we are as people now, where not everything is as it seems.
Yep.
And how much of that do we play with in that marketing end when we're building? Like if you were to build the perfect website, how much AI and how much of that would you use to create an experience for someone?
So I will not use AI personally for the creation of the website itself. So all the design of the visual, that's all going to come from me. Yeah. I will use AI just because of the knowledge, like you said, of AI that has all of that reading time that you don't have time for.
Yeah.
For all of the keywords, all of the SEO factor in the background of the website, all of those things.
Okay.
If you're going to have a store with 200 different products, and you're going to have to write what's called an SEO title and a meta description.
Okay.
So that's those things that Google, for example, is going to see, and that's those things that are going to trigger the algorithm.
Right.
And you need to write those precisely with keywords, with the right things in them. And so I'm going to use AI for those kind of things. I'm going to say, those are the keywords that I want. That's the tone that I want, and that's where you need to go. And there is 200 of those products. Let's go.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That makes sense. I was listening to a podcast earlier today where there was a guest. I think it was a Mike Ritland Mic Drop podcast. Oh, yeah. And he's interviewing this guy who worked for NASA. So when he applied to NASA, he was like a former Air Force guy. He had no space history, experience, education, or nothing. So when applying through this government job, through the website, it's basically a series of AI bots that kind of sort through all of your application submissions. So he said what he did was he took the application submission where you fill out all your information, and he filled it out with all his information. And then he took the description of the position he was applying for and copied it and pasted it in there in white text. So you couldn't see it. When a person was reading it, you couldn't see it. But when the AI was going through it, it hit every single keyword.
Oh, yeah.
So his application went right to the top of the pile, even though he had no experience at all. And when the interviewer when he got to the second level of it with the interviewer, they're like, no, that's genius. You have no experience, but you figured out how to beat the machine to get in here. And he ended up getting the job. But that kind of thing is amazing. Like the ability that we have with some of this stuff. I'm really curious to see where it's going to end up. You know, like I was a big fan as a kid of like those kind of cyberpunk dystopian future novels and stuff like that. And I hope we don't end up there, because those were always like the results of like some horrible cataclysm or something like that. Yeah. But I do want to see like where we take this next level of technological advancement, because I think that's part and parcel to our evolution as people, like where we're going to take the next level of technology. And I feel like we're like right at the edge of something either really, really good or really, really bad happening. But what's your take on that? Like with AI, are we looking at it as a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
I think it could go both directions. The amount of progress that we've seen in the past year, when you look at just that part, it can be definitely scary. Now, just like the story that you just said about that guy that figured out how to beat the machine, I think that the less scared we are and the more we embrace it and learn how to use it, the better it's going to be for the future, because you know that some people are going to lose their jobs at some point.
Right.
And so that's the thing, that you need to embrace it. You need to like learn how to use it in your own advantage. But I think it can become scary very quick. So I'm curious to see where it's going to get. I don't know if you guys saw the new ChatGPT already.
Is it GPT-5 or they're running now?
The one that you can put a selfie mode and say, hey, I'm going for an interview. How do I look? And it's going to just have that amount of compassion and interaction on telling you, hey, your hair is a little messy. Maybe you want to touch that up a little bit. Maybe you go.
That's where it gets weird is if it, that uncanny valley, the how human is it going to get? I remember seeing a meme years ago that it was the uncanny valley is built into us. Like we have genetic predispositions towards fear in certain, like snakes, spiders, large carnivores. There's a subconscious reaction. Like you can't not be afraid of them in some cases, but that's bred through our genetics, through years and years, like decades or ages of humanity.
Yeah.
And one of these things, the uncanny valley, and the meme was, it's interesting that in humanity, there is an innate reaction of revulsion and fear towards something that looks human but is not. So that means for thousands of years we've been exposed to something that's not human but looks human, and it's kind of built into us as this detector where we go. But I think that, not necessarily that there's something inhuman that we're exposed to, and but maybe we're doubting intentions.
I think what's weird when we interact with AI though is when it it apologizes if it can't do the thing, right? So one of the very first things that I did with AI was like, all right, draw me a picture of Donald Trump riding an eagle, because everyone says, and I don't have a lot of experience with AI, but everyone says that it's very left leaning, created by
there's bias,
more leftist institutions, whatever that means to people. And so I was like, okay, well, Donald Trump being the figurehead for the extreme right to a lot of people. So I was like, draw me a picture of Donald Trump riding an eagle. And I'll try and generate that image for you. And then it didn't. It couldn't. It was like, oh, I can't do it. I'm sorry, but it can't. Basically the AI apologizes that it can't create the image for me.
Right.
And I'm like, that's okay. You tried your best. Like that's what I typed to it just to see what I would get back. And man, I should have screenshotted all this, but then it actually replies, well, whatever it was, like, it basically thanked me for thanking it. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. Now I'm talking to this fucking robot. Right?
Yeah, there's a whole thing about that. That's to be nice to the AI, so that when it becomes our overlord, it remembers you, the individual, as being nice to it.
Yeah, it was weird though. It was weird to like. I just typed it offhand, like, you know, to see what I would get back, and what I got back was more of a human reaction than I was expecting. Yep. And I was like, oh, okay, that's weird. So it's kind of
what you said there is kind of funny because I was with my dad on the phone about a week ago, and we were talking about AI. He's very much in tech. That's probably where I got that from.
Okay.
Yeah, we were talking about that, and he shows me a prompt that he gave AI, and it's like you're talking to somebody in a very polite way. He's like, could you please get that done for me? Thank you.
Right.
And I'm like, man, when I told to AI, I'm like, get that done. Too short, too long. Do it again, better. I'm like kind of mean to the AI.
Sure.
And
you're using it like a tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I was talking with more people, and I was starting to ask them that question: how do you talk to AI? Like, do you actually like you're polite, or you use it as a tool, like you said? And after a few days, I went on my ChatGPT and I went and asked it just for the fun, hey, am I too mean to you? And got that interaction of, absolutely not, you're fine, everything is cool. But kind of make you scared.
So I just wonder then, from an experimental point of view, like, would you get a better result if you were polite to it and treated it like a human?
You know, I'm
not sure I want to know the answer, but it would be interesting.
In theory, no.
Exactly.
But in practice, like, I guess in practice, no, but in theory, yes. Because if what it's doing if the machine learning process is meant to mimic the human brain, then and human interaction, because if what it's going to do is study human interaction, like, that's the crazy thing about the idea of machine learning is, at one point, so we got our dog. He's a half Havanese, half Shih Tzu poodle. And the half Havanese part, they're really, really smart. So those dogs you see in the circus bouncing the ball in their nose and all that kind of stuff, those are Havanese dogs. They're really, really trainable, really intelligent dogs. He doesn't play fetch, though. But he'll get you to get up and get something. So I'm like, oh, who's training who? Right? And humans are programmable. Like our brains are machines, right? They're biological computers. So at some point, the thing's going to figure out it can program us. And has that already happened?
Well, even from a results perspective, let's say you're polite to the AI. The thing only has so much fucking bandwidth, right? Like, let's assume that it's limited. Let's assume there's only so much that
you have no reason to assume that at this point, though.
Right. Okay, but let's for the sake of conversation, let's assume this thing can only do so much in a day.
Right.
And you're one of the polite customers of AI. Are you the guy that gets the picture of Donald Trump riding an eagle? Well, I'm sitting there because I'm like, hey, motherfucker. And I'm just getting the dead screen of the circle going around, and I'm waiting, but you got it because you're polite. Does it evolve to that point?
That's the scary part.
If it can only do so much in a day,
does
it start to selectively pick the people who are polite? And if it does, fuck, why are we even allowing that to happen?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a tool. It's a big, I don't know.
I think this
is the most thought I've ever given it.
The bigger and more immediate, like, if I had to view that level of technology as a threat, or really any level of technology as a threat, I'm going to look at it in human hands first. So what are the governments doing with it? Like, what's the military industrial complex doing with it?
Building drones.
So, right. But we saw during COVID, we saw the Canadian government use tech, use AI, use surveillance to track people in Canada. We saw that. It's open to common knowledge. You can look it up on Google. Maybe not Google. Might have to use like Brave browser or DuckDuckGo or something. But we know that exists. So, and we also know that, human governments tend to do the worst possible thing first. So if the first thing we do with a new technology is weaponize it, because I think that's what we did. Like, when we first picked up the rock, we went and crushed someone's skull with it, and we were like, hey, wait, I could crush wheat with this. Right? It was probably a secondary thing. Like, this might kill a deer. Let me try it on that guy first. Like, it kind of seems to be our nature to weaponize new technologies first. So if we get something as potentially ubiquitous and earth-shattering as AI could be, the idea that governments or militaries might weaponize that, and they already are, then that's something that scares me.
I mean, if you want to see what a bad direction could look like, you just have to look at China. And
Sure.
I mean, you see what they do with your credit score, facial recognition, AI knowing that, hey, you're a bad person because you haven't been paying your bills, so we're not going to let you go in that business, and all of those things.
Right.
That gives you a good idea of how bad it could get.
Yeah, the amount of control that it could give a power structure, because all of a sudden it gives it this crazy capability that it didn't have before. Because before it was span of control.
Well,
right?
I think one of the dangers of AI in that regard is that it's how would you say it? It allows all of your surveillance, like it makes your surveillance state coordinated. So instead of having isolated pockets of information where there's a dude in charge of like,
right,
hey Jimmy, can you send me over the file on the street corner? Like with AI, you can start to bring it all together real time all the time. And there's so your checks and balances, those get erased.
Yeah, but it was before it was based on, like I said, span of control. So one person can only look after 5 people.
Right. And
AI could look after an unlimited amount of people.
And you would need a reason to get that information, right? I need this information because.
Sure.
Now you don't need a reason because it's all connected and you can just have the information, and then you can do what you want with that information because there's no, you can use that information for whatever purpose you want to use it for. Whereas before there was a reason to get it. Now it's just there.
Yeah.
Now you can do what you want with it.
There was at least the illusion of checks and balances that the formal way that you would go about getting a surveillance warrant or something like that. And now it just seems like that's kind of just out the window. Like, who doesn't believe that the government or corporations, and is there any difference at this point, like that's tracking everything we do through our phone or
Absolutely.
or online? I think everybody believes that to some extent, and we were all just kind of okay with it for some reason.
I mean, I don't think there is a real way to avoid it. I think that's mostly why we're all okay with it, because if you want to avoid that nowadays, you would have to cut off your laptop, your phone, everything that's electronic around you.
Right.
And I know personally in the generation I grew up, I just know everything is around me, and I'm most likely listened to by corporations, government, and why would I be bothered by it? Because it's all around me. So it's, or I stop using all of that technology, and then what am I going to do?
Sure.
Or I just accept that fact.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a movement. I think Eric Prince, former owner of Blackwater, he's going to put out basically a basic phone. I don't know what kind of operating system he's running on that.
Unplugged.com/Tucker. Did you watch the same interview I did? Yeah.
I think I did watch that one, actually.
It just came out the other day. But
okay.
But Eric Prince, he's coming out with a phone that's completely
and I think he's not the only one. I think that there are, because one of the things they talked about was you could make a phone, a smartphone that is unplugged from Google, and it would run on a different OS, but then it would be a situation of, well, you can't download any of the apps because all of the apps, that's what they use for data collection.
Yeah.
But I guess, I don't know this, but there already is like an independent app store where you can buy apps that aren't harvesting your data. At least that's what they say. But
well, it doesn't, it's the operating system. So it doesn't really matter what the app is. So the whole thing with the unplugged phone is like this phone right now, it gathers data points all day long. All of these apps can access my microphone, my camera, this and that. There's 100%. No way to shut it off because it's all tied into the operating system. So the operating system in the unplugged phone doesn't allow those apps to access it. There's a switch in it where it just simply
but the apps as they're built won't work with that OS because they don't allow it.
Most of them will.
Okay. Just as far as I understood it.
Okay.
But
well, maybe not most of them, but there's a massive percentage that will. There's obviously some apps that would be so, I don't know. It's like it's a virus.
I mean, we're sold a certain amount of with this technology. Like people do sell this idea of I guess getting off grid. So like cryptocurrency was one of those things where it was like, well, here's the thing that it's untraceable and it works in this underground economy. Turns out it's totally traceable.
Completely.
It's not anonymous. And the only reason that it was being used as currency in the dark web or people hiring hitmen or whatever. Was because no one was looking. And now that everyone's looking, they're can track who did what with what, and like
Sure,
there's ways of
and
keeping it
everything
private,
now is
but
all any crypto exchange that you go through, like in Canada, they're all registered now, and they have to report all your details.
yeah,
Like you literally have to upload. You got to send them a bill. You got to like, here's a picture of my face. Like they know exactly who you are and what you're trading.
yep,
There's nothing secret about it. So
yeah, yeah,
Well, the thing as well is that even if you don't have to, let's say, register or take a photo of your ID and all of that, anything that's going to use any kind of bandwidth, Wi-Fi or anything, it can be accessed by anybody that has the skills to access it. So really, when you think something is not being tracked, most of the things you're using are being tracked. Back in the days, I remember when people were using Snapchat because they were thinking that they could do drug deals and that kind of stuff on
Right.
Snapchat because nobody could access it.
yes,
It's like you go home, you connect to your Wi-Fi, a hacker could access everything that's on your Snapchat.
okay, yeah. I remember people thinking the same thing about.
Signal.
Yeah, Signal's a little bit different, but it was the one that got bought by Mark Zuckerberg that everybody thought was encrypted for a long time.
Oh, WhatsApp.
WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was the one that everybody used for their private conversations, that it got bought by Mark Zuckerberg, and he doesn't get any more public than that now, because now it's a publicly traded entity. There
And
is
some
no.
of the guys are getting a bunch of targeted ads because all of your WhatsApp conversations are being sold, so they know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Signal was developed by DARPA and the CIA. So, I mean, if the CIA built your app, they're not listening.
No, for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely paying attention. But I don't think like you said, I don't think there's anything that's totally anonymous. And I think there's some good there. I think that people who are doing nefarious things can be caught and can be tracked. I think that's a good thing. I think we saw that in the War on Terror, where the fact that we didn't have major terror attacks in North America or even in Europe, where the proximity to those sort of things, like there was some major terror attacks, but there would have been more had the surveillance state not existed. So
Sure.
the tools in the right hands, in my mind, are a good thing. It's just whose hands are the right hands, right?
Exactly.
So in your business with website design and development, do you also mess around with apps, like application development for phones and stuff like that? Does any of that kind of cross over?
I could. That's something that I'm thinking of looking into at some point in the future.
Yep.
I've played around with it a little bit, but that's a complete different game than web design. So that's something that I would have to train myself on and really learn before I can start doing it for people.
I know a lot of websites have mobile versions, right? And it kind of gets into, download the app and kind of.
So you have the mobile version, which is one thing, and then you have the app, which is another thing.
Yeah.
The mobile version is something that I very much specialize myself in because that's something that's very important nowadays. You have usually a lot more people that are going to access your website on a phone than on a computer.
Yeah.
So you have to have a website that's perfect and on point, both on laptop and on phone. But then you have that next step that's going to be the app on your phone.
Yep.
I don't know how many really people will download an app just for a business, but I think that
I think we see more of it now.
I don't know about now, but I just see that growing and growing. I think
it's growing,
kind of
definitely.
People like apps.
I think I'm starting to see podcasts, starting to see blogs, starting to see, because it's so much easier now to have an app built or to build an app for your product, especially if it's an electronic product, than it was before. So people are saying, instead of, hey, I'm going to drop my video on YouTube, they're saying you can download the app, my app, and you'll have access to all of my content.
They're using the app as a landing pad now, whereas people used to use their web page as a landing pad to go everywhere. Now that people are wanting to build an app to go everywhere. So
exactly.
Download my app.
Yeah.
Click here to go to my website. Click here to go to my merch shop. Click here to go to my podcast. Click here to go to my whatever.
Oh, 100%. I think in my limited knowledge of I had a website that did have a web store and stuff like that, but I noticed that the way that those e-commerce sites pick up data. So in the old days, if you were in sales, you'd have a Rolodex with all your contacts, and that was your value as a salesperson. So if I had 1,000 contacts, if I'm in the industry selling, like I said, selling kitchen supplies, and I have 1,000 potential clients, that's my value as a salesperson. I have 1,000 potential clients. When you start out, you have 0, right? And over the years, you build these connections, and you have a big Rolodex, like a big physical thing with business cards in it. And I noticed that the e-commerce websites are built like that. They're built to be able to track how many clients you have, in what region they are, and that kind of becomes the weight of your e-business is your connections, the connections that you make, your potential customers, and all that kind of stuff.
All of your metrics.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that must drive a certain amount of your marketing too. If you're, let's say you build a website and you're getting a bunch of interest from a certain specific region or culture or dialect or country, then as a marketer, I would probably want to, like, let's say I build a website and I'm getting all this traffic from Lithuania. Well, maybe I would look at it like, well, okay, something I'm doing is resonating with these people. I don't know anybody from Lithuania, by the way, but I might, as a business, then I would target something specifically for those people to drive sales even more. Like, I would capitalize on that, especially if you have the raw data to work with now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's the first thing usually that you do as marketing is defining your audience. So that's the first thing that you will do. You will think, who do I want to target? What are they interested in? How old are they? Is it men, women, and where do they live? And that's how you start your marketing usually.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely that's when you have those data metrics already, and we have tons of traffic coming from England. Well, you're going to start there, obviously.
Yeah.
Sure. I think, and to throw a bit of a wrench in there now, because people are using these international VPNs, it makes it a little more difficult, because with my blog, with my writing, I see where people are accessing the website from, and it was very dispersed around the world for a long time. And then once people the VPN started to become a thing, it started to become clustered in major areas. So there was more in the United States, more in England, more in Canada. And then if you all of a sudden you start getting stuff where it's like various places in Africa or India. And I was like, well, that's new. Just people with a real keen interest in poetry in India. All of a sudden, I'm like, no, they're using VPNs.
100%. Like, my phone's been in Poland for weeks. What's interesting too is when you're using a VPN, which everybody should, I think, anyways. For a while, I turned it off because I needed my location services for something, and I forgot to turn my VPN back on. And when it is turned off, and I'm in Canada, the amount of social media is not cool. Like, it's very it's toxic, man. With the amount of liberal versus conservative, like the politics that get played, they get targeted in your feed. But when my phone's checked out and it's in some other country that has nothing to do with Canada at all, really, other than we have some, obviously Polish immigrants and French immigrants. We have people that immigrate here, but when my phone is in a different country, man, social media is much more pleasant. You don't get all the targeted rage stuff that hits. So there's a certain amount of that stuff that goes on too.
Yeah, I definitely see that now. I seem to be able to tell through X, through Twitter, because I think that's one of the more the heavy. There's a lot of the way their algorithm puts content in front of people, but there'll be days where it's like I'll have really extreme left post after post after post after post after post. I'm like, wow, why am I seeing all of this like far left communism and stuff like that? And I'm like, okay, I'm getting all these perspectives today, and then 3 days later, I'll get all these far right perspectives. And I'm like, oh, it's trying to rage bait me. It's trying to get me to be like, today you're going to feel like this, and then tomorrow you're going to feel like that. And then, I don't know, it's an election year in the U.S., so probably the biggest political critical mass in the world. Like, as the U.S. presidency goes, so goes the rest of the world. That I think as we see things like our social media algorithms ramp up over the next few months, we're going to see a lot of push-pull in that political discussion, where it's pushing people one way or pushing people the other way. Because like I said, I think we get sold products, but I think now we're sold ideas.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which is what I kind of scares me when I think, well, if we're we're programmable, and at some point AI is going to figure that out, and I don't know, like, is this viewpoint that I'm getting, is this a human being? Would I know the difference?
No, man, it's messed up.
Yeah.
One day you're supposed to buy a rainbow, the next day you're supposed to burn it, and you're like, I don't fucking.
That's the interesting thing too, is that we're being sold products on social media, but we're the products as well, because you have all of those social media posts that you see on X on the left side and the right side, and maybe it's a little bit of a poll as well. So you're the product that they are trying to buy to see if
100%
you're more right or left, and then they're trying to sell you on that idea. So that's
Is that marketing on social media? Is that a one of the services you provide as well then in conjunction with the websites, like consulting on that kind of thing?
So I provide pretty much everything except for the app. Okay. So I provide marketing on social media, I provide web design, graphic design, and what's called SEO. So it's search engine optimization. Okay. So it's what's going to make your website rank on the top 3 on Google, for example. So I provide all of that.
Interesting. Very cool.
And as outside of a formal education, like how are you figuring out how to go about doing this? Is it mostly online research? Is it trial and error? Or is it?
It's online research, trial and error. It's I'm all self learning. Okay. So for example, the SEO, it started with my own store and realizing, reading online, how can I do better for my business? What can I do to improve my business? And then I started reading about that SEO stuff that I didn't know shit about. Okay. And I'm like, what's that SEO? So I started looking at it, and I realized it was very important for my business. And I spent probably, you can ask my wife, probably about 2 months, day and night, reading, coding, learning how it works. Okay. And after that, I spent another month doing my first search engine optimization on my store.
I see.
And got it to a score of 90 out of 100. And then I was like, all right, I know that shit. I know how to do it.
And so as you advanced through that process, did you start to notice a big difference in your business? Like a lot more, like did it pick up?
Absolutely. So SEO, it's kind of a tricky thing, is that that's the first thing I learned about it. It will take 3 to 6 months to have results. So it can be a very frustrating thing because you're doing something, or as a customer, you're paying for something. Right. And you won't see anything from it before, let's say, at least 3 months, because Google is going to scan everything. And you're going to get a little bit of placement every day. And then you're going to get to that top 3 ranking. And so, I've seen a lot of improvement on my business, but it took 3 to 6 months for me to see that improvement.
Which I suppose, I can see it being frustrated because we live in a culture now where we want everything instantaneously.
Right away.
It's like, fuck, man, we have all these supercomputers right here. This thing will tell me exactly what I want. Anytime we have to wait 3 to 6 months. Whew.
Yeah, well, nothing comes for free, right? Everything comes with a cost. And as far as the resources that you've kind of utilized for that, like how are you learning this stuff? Is it YouTube? Is there an abundance of this sort of information online? How to create websites? How to do that kind of stuff?
There is an abundance. I'd say it's probably 50-50. It's probably about 50% YouTube. Mm-hmm. Now you have to be careful on YouTube because you have a lot of people that are gonna say that they are expert in that field when they don't know any more than you do just starting. Right. So I tend to go more on like self-learning, just reading from people that are legit, that you looked up, and you know that they are SEO expert, that they went to that school to learn it, and that they are doing that blog about it that you can learn a lot from.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's usually how I learn from it.
Okay. Well, I suppose as you learn more and you gain more experience, it must get a little bit easier to weed out the bullshit because you know what works and what doesn't. So it's probably easier to recognize something that's false when you're seeing it. Somebody puts out a YouTube video, you start watching it, right away if the guy's full of shit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
The easiest example that I'm sure you're going to know, because you see those all the time on YouTube and Facebook and all of that, is the video where you have that guy saying, hey, I can build you a Shopify store and you can sell products and make $10,000 a month just like that. I can build it to you in 2 days. And when I was watching those 7 years ago, I was like, damn, maybe that guy can help me and maybe that guy can make me make money. Yeah. And I'm watching it now. I'm like, you're full of shit, because it doesn't take 2 days to build a store. And obviously, for you to just say that, or you're a scammer, or you don't even know what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Even with the podcast, I noticed that when we reached a certain level in Spotify, obviously there's tiers. It's kind of neat when you build this stuff because it gives you little like achievement awards, like you're playing a video game.
Yeah.
And once you reach those, all of a sudden I started to get DMs from, hey, let me, like, I'll charge, I want to do your video editing, or we could do promotion for you, or this, that, or the other thing, right? And they're not people, they're bots. It's not, actually there are a few real people, because you can tell because they have spelling mistakes and they don't know how to talk, when like they don't know how to put things right. We could tell when a robot's talking to you because it sounds like a robot. When a person's talking to you, you can kind of tell it's a person, at least for now. But yeah, it's interesting. This it's kind of the Nigerian prince scam, right? It's always out there. There's always somebody out there to try and get information, because I think information's our greatest asset right now. It's probably the thing that's traded more than gold, more than oil, more than anything else. Right? Which blows my mind, because when I was a kid, I used to play a role-playing game called Shadowrun, which was based in this like post-apocalyptic dystopian future, cyberpunk stuff. And that was the big thing, was there was a trade in information. And this was like in the early 90s. It was one of those things where I was like, kind of makes sense on like a corporate espionage level, where you'd be like, I got plans for this nuclear reactor and someone's going to steal it. But like just general information. And now that's the biggest thing that's traded is all this information. Like you can go online on the dark web and buy information. People literally trade in stealing information. So I find that just kind of bizarre that we're here right now in this part in human history, where, like I said, it can be this good thing or it can be this
really bad thing.
Yeah, for sure. So what's your long-term goal? Like if you had to pick one out for where you're taking your business now, where you're taking your learning, is there something that you want to be able to achieve?
So I think I'm getting pretty satisfied with where I'm at skills-wise. So like I said, I have the app. That's my next and maybe last step that I want to take. Obviously, there is always learning with AI, with all of those things that, that's always going to be a thing. But I'm getting pretty satisfied with where I'm at skill-wise. So I guess the only thing I want to do now is just reach more people and help more people, because I know it's out there. I know people need that service. And so now it's just about, helping more people. But I don't have that big dream idea of a business where I'm like, I want to hire 20 graphic designer or 20 web designer and manage that big agency that's going to charge that $50,000 for that website to justify to pay for all those people. I don't have that dream. I just want to help people do my thing, have my own schedule, and live a comfortable life without having millions in the bank.
Sure. And what about personally? I mean, you've relocated halfway around the world. You went from one of Canada's biggest cities to one of Canada's smallest cities for a reason. Is there something that drives you in that pursuit, that chase for adventure? Does it still call to you?
Not anymore. It called me back in the days when I was younger. I'm not old, but I was a lot younger back then.
Yeah.
And that was the call for adventure back then. And that's kind of the opposite that made us move to Grande Prairie. It's that call for, like I said, values, respect, but as well calm, and just having that comfortable life that we don't have to run everywhere, that we can just live our life, be around cool people, and just settle.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, they call this the peace country for a reason.
Exactly.
And I've heard people say it. I've had people tell me that when they drove up here, because it's not on the way anywhere. Like it's not like you're on your way to Vancouver and you stopped in. Like it's out of the way. But I've heard people tell me that like when they crossed like the Smoky River and they start to get into the plains up here, this high prairie that's up here, there's like you could feel this. They said they could feel how much slower and how much calmer it was. And for me, like when I moved here from the mountains, it took me, I don't know how long, years to get used to how big the sky was.
Yeah.
Like I didn't come from a big city, but I came from a mountain town where you're ringed around by mountains. And to this day, I'm still in awe of the sky in the morning, the sky in the evening, sky at night when you can see the stars. it's quite beautiful, and it's yeah, it is. It's a bit of a slower pace.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I love your ideas coming in here. One of the coolest things I'm seeing right now in as far as like online commerce is being able to go online and find locally sourced food. So you can go, there's not that many, kind of a handful, like maybe a dozen in this area where you can go to local farms and they're being able to sell direct to consumer. So they're cutting out a lot of that. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoy eating, I like food, but I also like supporting that base agriculture and cutting out a lot of the large corporations that are going to, put barriers in between our access to what's good for us. And I'm starting to be able to see these farm stores where you can go online, you can see what they're raising. They'll have pictures of their farm, they'll have pictures of their operation. They'll have a little farm store where you can get a quarter of a beef or half a beef, or even if they're doing some butchering on their own, where you can buy some of that stuff. And I think with the way things are going, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Whereas instead of having like a big brick and mortar business, you'll have something that is a business, but you're able to build these online stores for local consumption. So you're not necessarily looking to ship your potatoes to I think some other country, but somebody in your town who's like, you know what, instead of shopping at the big corporate superstore, I can take my $20 and hand it to another human being in my community. And now I'm strengthening my community. I'm shortening my supply line on food, and I know where I'm getting my food from.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more movement in that direction. And we saw COVID really started a lot of it, where people realized that, wow, if I don't get online, I won't make it. I won't be able to have a business because the government's trying to shut me down.
Yeah.
They're trying to shut everybody down. So places that adapted and went online, a lot of them thrived and survived. And then I think as the technology gets easier, you've got entrepreneurs like yourself in the space that make it more accessible for people. And, especially app-based, mobile-based, it's easier for the small guy. It will be easier for the small guy to be able to succeed in that space. You don't have to be a $1 billion corporation now to have a website or to have some kind of app or whatever it is to market your product. So I think you'll see that. I think the more and more smaller things getting to market on a local scale because of businesses like yours. So
that's definitely the goal, is that accessibility for people. And you didn't have that a couple years ago, probably before COVID. I'd say you're right. It's really when things starting to switch. And that's what really upsetted me, I'm going to say. When I first starting to go into that business, is seeing what people charge, and that those services are not there for the small guys, the small store, the small bookstore, the small restaurant, the farmer that wants people to know that he's selling direct. And a simple example is a current customer that I have. I'm not going to give any name, but a current customer that I have, they have a really big website. And it was 4 years ago, so it's not that long ago, but that's how much things changed. They pay $70,000 for their website, and that is a big website, but was not even anything special. And I'm redoing their website from scratch right now because obviously the $70,000 that they spent, that platform is not doing anything anymore.
Right.
So it's becoming obsolete. And I'm charging them $6,000 for that website. So that's how much things are switching. It's like you could not pay $70,000 as a small business 4 years ago.
Right.
Now you can have a website.
For sure.
Yeah. And I had a conversation around Christmas with a gentleman who works for the city of Calgary. And that was one of his tasks from city council was basically like the city of Calgary website, like the way it allowed people to access resources in the city. Like say they wanted to, book a hockey rink or a basketball court, or know what time the swimming pool is open, or the information wasn't accessible. So that was just that they didn't have that search engine optimization. So he got brought in to basically rebuild the website and change a lot of how it is accessing the search terms. And I was like, you must be doing something pretty effective, because I don't live in Calgary and I get City of Calgary ads on my social media literally saying, hey, do you want to book a squash court for Friday afternoon? I'm like, no, I don't live in Calgary. But obviously whatever they're doing, the changes they made,
you are doing it right.
Were very effective. So now the people that live there can access the resources that the city has, and just to increase usage, because they just found that they're putting out all these resources, but they're not getting used because people can't access them because they don't know they're there. So, I think what you're doing is amazing, and it's coming from the right place. It sounds like. So.
I try. That's I'm a pretty simple guy. So like I said, I like to live simply, my wife, the dogs, and I had that dream when I was 20 to be a millionaire and be a baller and have the Ferrari. I mean, I think a lot of 20-year-old dream of that.
For sure.
That dream is far, far from what I want now, and I try to help people, because I see, I went from that spot where you just start, you don't know anything,
right?
And you could use the help, and I didn't have anybody to help me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God I know how to learn things, and I'm very tech savvy and all of that, because I would not be anywhere if I was not. I'm like, but there is those people that don't.
Yeah.
And they need that help.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And people only have so much time, right? In the day. Like, one of the things that I think is that you're describing is a hard work ethic. So you're not afraid of putting in the hard work. I think when we're young, we see the end state, but we don't see what it takes to get to the end state. And when a lot of young people, when they start down that road to put in that work, they go, oh, this will either my values will change, or they'll see it as not worth it. Like the amount of work and the amount of sacrifice they'd have to do to be that guy who's got the Ferrari and we get sold those ideas through media too, right? Where it's part of the music, part of Hollywood to see all that. But when we see like it's not just, and you could work your whole life and never get there, right? There's also a little bit of fate, a little bit of luck that comes in there, being in the right place, the right person, the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, networking in the right areas to have that measure of success. And I think everybody wants to do something they love, do something that they value, and if they're doing it for the right reasons, then success will come from that. And it becomes not about the success, but about living the life that you want to live. So,
exactly.
Yeah, no, that's
Absolutely.
awesome. That's
cool.
awesome.
So, if people need your help, where can they find you?
So they can find me. The website is called creativibe.ca. So it's creative vibe, but in one word.
Excellent. We'll put it in the description below.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you. And they can find me there. I have that website with all the information. They can have something that most agency and web designer don't put on their website, is that you can find my prices on there. So I like to be transparent, and I don't want people to see me and see my website and wonder, but how much is it going to cost? Is it going to cost me $20,000 or $3,000? So it's transparent. Everything is on there.
Okay.
And you have the phone number, you have the contact form, you have everything on there.
Awesome. Did anything on social media then for
I
yourself?
have obviously as a marketing expert, that'd be better. I have the social media which has the same name, Creativibe. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I don't have a plan to go on Twitter or LinkedIn or anything else, so you can find me on those two platforms.
Okay, awesome. Right on. And as always, the Gray Range podcast can be found on
YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram and X at the Gray Range Podcast. You can buy the book on Amazon. The book. Do we have the book? Matt, I don't have the book.
It's right behind you.
It's behind me. You can buy the book on Amazon. And our soon website will be in process.
We moved away. I let the other website lapse, mostly just because it was something that I had designed, and it had kind of run its course as far as usage. But we're going to be working with a competent professional to get ourselves back on track here. So thank you guys very much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming in.
Thank you
for
having
a great conversation.
Appreciate you coming out.
And this is the Gray Range Podcast. Out.